There are 56 ethnic groups in China. There are two main groups in Xizhou, the Bai, which is one of Yunnan's most prosperous minorities, and the Hui, who are also known as the Chinese Muslims. The Bai make up around 85% of the population, and the Hui make up around 10 to 15%. Though relationships between ethnic groups in the area are good nowadays, that was not always the case. One of the biggest conflicts in the history of the area is the Hui massacre of 1872. Upwards of 110,000 Hui men of all ages were killed in this event. As I reflect upon my process and journey of learning about Hui history and ethnic relations in Xizhou, one must consider the form my inquiry project took before the trip, early on in the trip, and late in the trip. In the pre-trip prep phase, I'd initially wanted to investigate the impacts of tourism on ethnic relations and the differences in how tourists perceived relationships between ethnic groups in the area and how locals perceived these relationships. This aspect of tourism was actually one of the reasons behind why I chose my topic of ethnic minority issues. The topic on its own intrigued me, so when Mr. T helped me figure out a way to integrate it with the topic of ethnic minority issues, I completely jumped on it. While I was conducting background research, it was interesting to see all the articles and books relating to the recent and very quick development of the tourist industry in the Yunnan and Dali area. I remember being really excited about this. Early on in the trip, however, I learned that there were many more layers to this topic of ethnic minority issues that I hadn't even had a chance to investigate. I had also started to understand the process of gathering information from locals better and realized that finding tourists that would be willing to talk to me would be much more difficult, and I could potentially be interrupting their vacation. The first conversation I had as part of Phase 3 research was with Mr. Du. He got really into discussing the history behind the Hui massacre of 1872 and described it pretty graphically too. Basically, the Hui were gathered and surrounded by the Qing army. They were then forced down a canal that transferred water from the mountaintop to villages down below and killed. The next day, Mr. Taffel and I went to the mosque to go see some of the signs regarding more sensitive historical topics, including events such as the Cultural Revolution, Great Leap Forward, and the Hui Massacre. These were the first couple of times I was exposed to the history and depiction of the Hui Massacre. My focus had definitely shifted at this point, but there was not yet any clarity in terms of the direction my final project would take. A second turning point was when Mr. T and I visited the memorial sites regarding the massacre and Du Wenxiu. It was also on that day where I had an important conversation with Mr. Wang, who was our driver for the afternoon. He, like Mr. Du, depicted the event in pretty graphic detail. Getting the opportunity to visit all of these places was absolutely incredible and surreal. Upon seeing the very same waterway Mr. Du had depicted, I could not and still can't even begin to comprehend the terror and chaos among the Hui who were gathered by the Qing army. It was insane being there on the site. I could see where the waterway narrowed and could tell that that was where the bulk of the killing must have been done. Guns and knives and cannons, whatever weapons they had, the Qing army used. Imagine the screams and wails and cries that must have left the mouths of countless people. Imagine others ruthlessly killing, stepping over bodies and spilt blood. It's insane to think about the measures those who survived had to take to do so, hiding in bushes for days at a time, running for the mountains until they collapsed. Supposedly, there was so much blood that the water in the canal ran bright red for days and even weeks to come. Mr. Wang was also the first one to tell me about the annual remembrance of the killing. Every year, Hui from all around Yunnan gather at the massacre site. I am not saying that mass killings aren't wrong, because they are definitely among the darkest things, but in some sense, the Hui massacre is kind of beautiful. It may have broken an entire people at one point, but now it brings them together and serves as a quiet reminder of the strength they have in numbers. It was this trip that had solidified my vision and provided clarity in the direction I wanted my project to go in. The conversations I had afterwards with other contacts had a clear purpose, and for the first time, I knew exactly what I was looking for. Overall, my inquiry project went through many changes, and I'm really glad that it did. This experience has taught me so much, and the journey has been absolutely incredible. Microcampus is a month of my life that I will forever cherish and remember.